This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome to episode 168 of the Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and special thanks to Private Internet Access. I've been a customer of Private Internet Access for 3 years now, and I love this service. I was at a security conference a few years back, and I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, and immediately my endpoint protection software started alerting me that I was being attempted to be hacked, and I guess you could expect that from a security conference. But anyway, I launched my VPN from Private Internet Access, and all the attempts just stopped. My data and the internet connection is now secure with Private Internet Access, and I've been using their service again for 3 years, and I love it. I love the fact that you can choose different geographical locations, so you can test things like how your DNS is resolving and use it for many different reasons. But that's one definite use case for the different geolocations that you can choose with Private Internet Access. And you can get your VPN starting at $3.33 per month. Yes, that's right, $3.33 per month by going to geekleader.com/VPN. All right, Geek Leaders, today on the show, I've got Marek Zmysłowski. And Marek, I really got into your book. He's the author of a book called Chasing Black Unicorns. And when you first sent it over to me, I thought, well, let me give this a try, let me check it out. But it was one of those books that I could not stop reading, and I was just like hooked on it. And the audiobook was fantastic. I'm not sure who you had do the voice, but he did a great job. And overall, I just cannot recommend this book enough.
Thank you so much, John. This is so nice of you, and thanks for having me on your show.
So since I'm assuming most of my audience probably haven't heard of this book or haven't checked it out yet, but I'm assuming they will once we finish talking. Tell us a little bit about your journey, because you are from Poland, and you got an opportunity to co-found a company in Nigeria, internet company, tech company. So that's kind of how it ties into a Geek Leader and the rest of our tech audience. Yeah. And you got there, and it seems to be a crazy story about corruption, but also a country that is on incredible growth when it comes to technology that I was unaware of. And then you got into being wanted by the police and going on an international kind of hunt to sort of get revenge, but also to clear your name. And you learned a lot, you grew a lot through this whole story, but I felt like after listening to the book and going through it that I kind of knew you. But if you don't mind, just tell a little bit about your side of the story, kind of what it was like for you.
Sure thing. So yeah, my life story in a couple of words is that I was Polish born, but I spent most of my professional career, I'm talking about the last 10 years, almost in sub-Saharan Africa. And this region has given me, the most extreme adventures I could ever imagine to have in my life, both on the positive side, because one of the companies we have launched ended up on New York Stock Exchange, but also on the negative side. Basically, my local Nigerian business partner tried to get rid of me from the company, and when he failed, he basically bribed the police to put me into jail. So I signed all the papers they wanted me to. So I give the company away for free without getting into the details. So that's the business aspect of the book, where I, on one side, I'm writing a lot about how to, launch online businesses in such a strange region as sub-Saharan Africa and everything that I learned about it. Then there are chapters about, what do you have to do when someone has put your name on Interpol Most Wanted list, and my name was next to ISIS terrorist, essentially. And then it took me 2 years to fight back. I'm the only foreigner in the history of Nigeria that took Nigerian police to court and won. They owe me money and so on. So that's the business layer.
Well,
then
go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, sorry. Just a sentence. And then the high level perspective is that this is really a book about getting much more mature, because I do also mention, that I was a bullied kid in high school. And I went bankrupt when I was 21. I made a lot of money in the financial sector, and I lost it all. And everything that has happened to me when I was 19, 20, 21 really then defined me when I was 32. So I also wanted to understand what's been happening to me, which is the personal layer of the book, and that's how it all came together.
Yeah, and I mean the book seems to be so relevant to everything that's going on today as well, because here in the United States, we have a bunch of race things that have been kind of exploding due to corruption of police and things like that. And your book kind of talks about that as well, but from a Nigerian perspective, which I thought was really enlightening, as well as interesting. The fact that race problems aren't only a U.S. thing; it seems to be a worldwide phenomenon that you kind of hit on in your book as well. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I guess this is really now irrelevant because of everything that has been happening lately in the States. I mean, it's always been there. It's just now being loud and being recorded and so on. I knew that already in 2013 because my story is that I was born and raised in Poland, and Poland was a homogeneous country. Like everyone was white and Catholic, and I kid you not, the first black person I've ever met was the ambassador of Nigeria when I went to get a visa to go to Nigeria. And I was even asking myself a question like, am I a racist or not? Because how can I know? I was so curious. I was looking at that guy, I didn't know if he's 20 or 50 because, if you have a black skin, you have a lot of melanin and you just don't age that fast. And then I land in Nigeria, and then what was a shock for me is that I had so many people which were really hating on me and accusing me of being another version of a colonizer just because I'm coming from a privileged region and trying to open a business there. And for me, everything was extremely new because in Poland, it was a post-communist country. We never had anything to do with colonies in Africa and so on and so on. And I'm not putting myself here as a victim, not at all. I'm just telling you that I am not surprised at all that all those racially driven, I don't want to use the word conflicts, but some kind of tensions, whether this is in personal life or in business, were always there. It was like so visible for me. I had to talk about race on a daily basis because I was a white investor in a black country that has been abused by a white nation before, by the British colonizers, only a couple of only a century before me.
Yeah. Well, I thought the timing of this book and kind of what went on with that was really interesting. But then also you have a whole section about Ebola and kind of like epidemic that was going on.
Yeah.
And right now we're in the middle of COVID pandemic worldwide, so it was very relevant to hear about the fact that you were going through temperature scans at the airport and stuff years before everybody else is doing it everywhere now.
That is true. That's like another. This wasn't planned. I wasn't planning COVID to happen now when I published the book, but I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, in 2016, when Ebola outbreak happened in Nigeria, and I was in Lagos. My whole team was evacuated. Most of my friends from Europe, they got on the last plane and went back to Europe. I was one of those crazy guys that decided to stay. Not because I was courageous or something. I just really underestimated the risk back then. So this COVID situation right now, I treat this way more lightly because I've already been through this. Just like you said, we had those quarantines when you couldn't move out from one place to another. Ebola was a slightly different disease because it kills you so fast, it cannot really spread properly, because it kills you like in 7 days. So as soon as the flights are down, no one can move around with the flights. It can't really spread from village to village or from city to city because by the time people get to another city, they're already so sick they can't move and their symptoms are visible. And Ebola also, you can't get an Ebola from another person if they don't have symptoms. You only start contracting the disease to someone else if you already have symptoms yourself. So when you feel bad, you know what you have to do. Just go to a hospital, don't talk to anyone. So it was way easier to protect yourself from Ebola, but the stress of dealing with a disease that has such a high mortality rate, because I think it was like 80% or 70% of people that contract will also die. That was stress on a totally different level, and it was stressful back then. And I guess I considered my preparation to COVID much better now because just again.
Yeah, for sure. So. What is the perception that most people, would you say that most people have of the tech scene in Africa?
Perception by people from the outside?
Yeah, like maybe Europeans or Americans or anybody that's never been to Africa. What is your perception of what we think Africans tech scene is like?
So I'm going to tell you what I knew about Nigeria before I made this decision to go. I learned in school that some bunch of white assholes from France and UK, today's UK, back then British Empire, did something bad to the people in Africa. They colonized them, they turned them into slaves. And then they did something even worse by the way they decolonized the countries in the early, in the 1960s, in the 20th century, because they have given them the political power, but the way they created the countries is that they joined together different tribes with a story of 1,000 years of fighting. Imagine combining two tribes together, two ethnic groups. They were fighting with each other for 1,000 years, and now they have to have a country together. So it was designed to fail. So by giving them political power to run this country, which will be unstable because of those internal conflicts, and no economical power because the companies were still owned by international capital, it was a recipe for disaster. So that's what I knew from school. And then when this investment fund that I worked with told me, we want to open an e-commerce group in Nigeria that we're going to start, and we want you to go there. I Googled Nigeria, and all I knew was there's this Nigerian prince that wants to send me money. I have to give him my credit card. And I heard about Boko Haram. And, that's all I really knew. And obviously, that's when you dig deeper. That's when the investment fund you're working with tells you, look at the macroeconomics, look at the exploding middle class. What's happening to Africa, sub-Saharan Africa now, is basically what's been happening to China 15, 20 years ago. So an explosion of purchasing power and of middle class. Probably it's not going to happen as fast and as swift as in China, because China is a much different government. We can talk about that on a separate call. But there was the same sense of potential and these huge opportunities. In 2012, 7 out of 10 fastest economies in the world were actually coming from sub-Saharan Africa. And they were growing so fast, not because oil price was going up. They were growing so fast because the internal demand was growing. So we figured there's something inside there. And then you land there and you start living in Lagos. You go to Cairo in Egypt. You go to Nairobi in Kenya, and then you realize that these are huge cities that have 20 million people per city, that have skyscrapers, great fast internet. Faster than San Francisco, I'm telling you. In 2013, internet in Lagos was faster than in San Francisco. And people who are really interested in buying stuff online, in playing games and paying money and using social media, and they're really hungry to see what that technology, what is there in the technology, what they can buy if they have any money. If they make any money, they just want to spend it. So I was blown away, because I come from Poland, which at that stage was already a pretty advanced economy, let me just say. Maybe not Germany, but still. Mm-hmm. And when you land in Lagos, you just see a business opportunity at every corner, because as a client, you want to order food online. You want to do a food delivery. You want to book a hotel. You want to book a ticket to the cinema. You want to buy something online. You want to do so many things using your mobile application, using your phone, and just nothing is there yet. That was the feeling in 2012. So you had like a new business idea every 5 minutes, because you were just missing something that you were used to in the States or in Poland. So you kind of felt like you have this power to see the future simply because you come from a more advanced economy. Mm-hmm. And this is very captivating for a foreigner investor or an entrepreneur. That chaos, because obviously it's a very early stage economy, everything is chaotic, the infrastructure challenges are great, there's a lot of corruption, which I then became a victim of, and so on and so on. But at the same time, that feeling of opportunity, for the lack of a better word, like this last Wild West, for a businessman, for an entrepreneur, it was like a paradise.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I got out of your book, is that although there was a lot of chaos, you had a lot of challenges that you wouldn't have starting a business in the United States, but you also had significantly greater opportunity. You talked about in the book about power outages going on and things like that. Well, in hotels not having Wi-Fi or claiming it was broken all the time,
Yeah.
And you don't have that here in the U.S., but you also because you don't have that, you have significantly greater opportunity if you can overcome some of those infrastructure challenges.
Absolutely. And I always looked at this as a risk-reward balance. The risk was very high. If something can go wrong, it will most probably go wrong. This is, by the way, among investors or people that do business in Africa, there's the saying, you always want to start a business in Nigeria because on one side, it's the absolutely biggest potential of a market size. Doesn't matter what sector you're looking at. But then if something can go wrong, it will most likely go wrong in Nigeria. I hope no one will be upset with me for saying that. But that just means it's a very challenging market. And if you know how to build a business in Nigeria, then it's going to be way easier to go to Ghana or Namibia or Tanzania. You know what I mean? And the risk reward was always balanced. Huge risk, but also huge reward. Where there are businesses in Europe or Western Europe or Latin America or North America where you go where it can be an imbalance. The risk can still be high, but the opportunity might not doesn't need to be that high as well because there's so many other companies that do what you are trying to do. In Nigeria, I had huge challenges that the market has represented, infrastructure basically, and corruption, but I didn't have too much competition, and I liked that. Where in Europe, whatever I would try to do, immediately there's 100 other companies that are trying to do the same as I am trying to do. And I just prefer the other type of challenges, like and again, excuse me for my lack of a better word, the Wild West challenges, because I just like chaos. I like the early stage of a market as an entrepreneur. And that's what really gets you addictive, yeah, because in a way it's an addiction to do business in such markets. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you also had to overcome some of the cultural challenges too. And I know, like in reading your book, one of the things that is really important to me in the States is kind of being on time and understanding, time. Whereas he talked about in Nigeria, it's kind of like the concept of, it's either going to be a little bit or a long. You don't really know exactly when things are going to happen. Yeah. And you were able to kind of adapt to that and move through that. And maybe even use some of that as an advantage when it came to negotiating with people and understanding the local business. And one of the things that, as you're overcoming this culture, you talked a lot in the book about how online business is done offline. It's kind of done in person. Yeah. Can you explain a little bit about some of the things you learned going through that process and learning those cultural differences?
Sure. So I want to address 2 points that you've mentioned. First, those cultural slight differences, they can be very frustrating and also very dangerous. Frustrating in a way is that basically you're used to certain things being done in a certain way, and your mind likes to find shortcuts. Your mind wants you to be used to stuff so you don't have to think about the same stuff over and over again. And when suddenly you land in a different culture and they do it the other way, I'm not saying it's a better way or a worse way, it's just different. You're going to be subconsciously frustrated because it's not what you're used to, and your mind is fighting against it. And it's a very slippery slope to come from frustration to some sort of a xenophobia or a racism even. There's this joke in Nigeria that, people that live there, they tell you is that the question goes, what's the difference between a tourist and a racist? And the answer is a week. So basically it means if you don't arrive in a new country with new culture, if you don't do this with an open mind, the frustrations will pile up and it will turn to something very nasty. So what I consciously did is that I really tried to keep an open mind, and I accepted that some things are just done in a different way, not better, not worse, just different. And you either go with it or you don't, because you're going to end up, just losing your mind on fighting for everything. And the concept of time was one of those things, like you mentioned. It's just more fluid. It's just one of those differences. Another example is that you can imagine that if we were now having a conversation in a coffee shop, in a public space, we would try to keep the voice down, not to irritate people around us. Where in some ethnic groups, it's actually considered as rude, because if you're talking very quiet to your friend, that means you have something to hide. You're not an honest person. So in certain groups, certain ethnic groups, speaking loudly is actually a sign of being an honest person and being well educated. And you would never think about this. And then you also mentioned the case of running an online business really doing this offline.
Yeah.
So my case was really we were launching this e-commerce group called Jumia.com. We had 7 verticals, from e-commerce to marketplace to online travel to ride-hailing, food delivery, classifieds. I was personally responsible for the online travel part, but there was 7 co-founders. Each of us took care of a different vertical. And if you build an e-commerce in Europe, you can easily leverage on the existing infrastructure and logistics networks because the shopping malls are there already, the supermarkets are there already, the bookstores are there already. You just try to move the client behavior from going to a shopping mall to going to an online supermarket. And you can use the same service providers that do logistics for you or drop shipping. You can sell something online that you don't even have in your warehouse yet. Where in Nigeria and then in Kenya, not so much in South Africa because South Africa is much more developed, but that's a different story. If I wanted to sell something online, first I had to build my own warehouse and import 80% of the stuff from China or somewhere else because there were just not enough shopping malls back then yet. I think in 2012, 20 million people city, Lagos. I mean, like shopping malls, there was maybe 50. I'm talking about like a large size shopping mall. So the market was not existent yet. There were hundreds of thousands of small merchants, but you couldn't really leverage on their logistics network yet. There was no DHL or UPS that would work with an online company like ours. They only did large scale deliveries. So in order for us to deliver stuff to someone living somewhere in the city, we had to build our own logistics network. So after 2 years, we had more cars than UPS, than FedEx in Nigeria. So I had to first fix the infrastructure challenges in order to build this online business. And it was the same thing with marketing. Very fast, 70% of our budget was being spent offline because we kind of maxed up the budgets on Google. Like there was only so many keywords we could put our ad on top of, and there was just not more searches to really put money on. So for us, in order to keep growing faster, I couldn't just rely on people that are already on the internet. I had to go offline and then educate my potential client to start buying stuff online for the first time, so they will stay then. That's what's happening now, for example, in Europe or in China, when I guess in the States to some extent as well, that because of COVID, people that would never go online because they never wanted to change their behavior patterns, now they had no choice. They had to buy something online.
Yeah.
So you had the chance to increase your target group. And that's what we were doing. That's what we did for our hotel booking website, when we would send our people with iPads to every bus station in Nigeria, in the biggest cities, and to airports. And if someone was waiting in a line to buy a flight ticket, we would just come to that person and ask them, have you booked a hotel yet? No one has ever booked a hotel on time, because in the culture, you would never book on time. You would just arrive in the city and ask the taxi driver to take you to a closest hotel. And we were showing them that you can actually book something online. You will see how the hotel looks like on the photos. Book it before and maybe get a discount because it's cheaper online. So we had to go offline. We had to go and meet the client in person, face to face, to tell him about using a website, and then hoping that then the next time he will do it on his own already using his phone.
Yeah.
Which is, it now sounds obvious, but it wasn't that obvious back then. If you think that you have an online business, which means you acquire customers online as well. Turns out not always.
Yeah. So in the book, you talked a little bit about kind of your past of you were a financial advisor for a little bit of time, and you kind of got fed up with that and needed something new and something different. How much of the skills that you learned when you were selling, essentially selling those financial services, were applicable when it came to running the online businesses?
Yeah, financial advisor is a big word.
It is, isn't it?
I was essentially an investment broker.
Yeah.
And those were the years 2005, 2006. So in the middle of the financial markets growth in Poland, it was crazy. You could sell investment funds. The returns were like $10,000 for one client. And then we would sell mortgages. The money was just too easy. And I joined one of those early financial brokerage companies in Poland, pretty similar to what you could see in Wolf of Wall Street, maybe without the illegal stocks being sold. And that's where I made my first big money, and that was the school of life for me because I was working directly with the CEO and the founder, and he was my first mentor and coach. He has given me the biggest lesson of business, mostly on the sales part, and the communication and the ability to sell, whether you're selling a product or a vision or yourself. This is something that has helped me always later. Managing sales teams. When we were running this online travel business, I had to basically visit every hotel in sub-Saharan Africa and convince them to work with us, that we will put them online, we will send them client, and they will pay us a commission. That wasn't, and that's obvious for us in the States because Booking.com exists. For them, we were the first company to offer that. So what we did is that in 3 years, we've signed 20,000 hotels. And back then, Booking.com was working with maybe 2,500 hotels in sub-Saharan Africa. So we were like 10 times more effective. And it was all sales skills of being able to manage people, the sales teams, decentralized sales teams. So amazing life skill, which is also part of my book, yeah, because then 2008 came and all those millions we had turned around and they became millions of debt.
Yeah.
Because once you stop selling, you don't make any money, but it's not easy to change your lifestyle, to quickly give out your toys, stop using your cars and renting those expensive apartments. And yeah, that's how I ended up being broke, which is also in the book, but that's a different story.
Yeah. And you also, I guess from that point, decided to get into entrepreneurship and got into the to the undertaking business.
Yeah.
which actually prepared you for your time in Nigeria, correct?
As funny as it sounds, yeah, the funeral business really prepared me for Africa business. And for listeners probably now saying, what kind of a story is that? Let me quickly give you a context here. So I was this totally broke guy because I lost all my money and I had to hide away really from my debtors. I was working as a bartender back then. This was the only job for me available because as a bartender, you just make money from tips and they pay you at the end of the shift. So there was no bank transfer. No one could take my money. I would get this in cash, which would allow me to survive. And then a friend of mine was starting this thing called a startup, a mobile application that apparently is supposed to change the world. I was coming from a financial sector. For me, it was all BS.
Yeah.
But he offered me some very, very small salary and maybe some shares. And I was working for him during the day, and then I was this bartender in the evening. And that's how I really got myself into startups. And I was such a lucky guy that he was able to sell his company. And the money I made because, apparently those shares he gave me, which I thought they're worthless, they made me some money, which allowed me to pay my debtors. So obviously I fell in love with startups, and I was like, I'm going into this technology space because there's money there. So for me, it was pretty money oriented in the beginning, and then I really fell in love with in the online space. I reminded myself about the coding skills because I used to study at the technical university a little bit, and so on and so on. And to finish the story of my changes, I knew I wanted to open an online business because I knew I had a chance to raise some money from investors and maybe do something on my own this time. But I could see that every smart guy, whether from the United States or from Poland or from Russia, everyone that had a little bit of brains was trying to start another Facebook, another Twitter, another MySpace. This social media thing was this hot thing. And I figured if every young guy that is smart is going to social media, to all those cool stuff, sexy sectors, I want to find a business where I can still do something with technology, but I want to find a business where none of those smart guys will ever want to enter. And that's how I find funeral business, because you can't go to a pub and talk to a girl and tell her that you're running a business in funeral business. All those geeks don't want to do this. Yeah. So I figured I can do an online business in this funeral sector because people are still needing the services and they search for them online. And this will be a way for me to keep away the potential competition because no one wants to look at this sector yet. But like I told you earlier, I prefer to work in a tough market, but where the challenges come from the market itself, not from the competition. And we essentially build a platform to book your funeral online. So it's like Booking.com just for funeral services. And I had to deal with funeral home directors that were on average 50, 60 years old, and they also didn't know much about internet. They never cared about this. And that experience of working with those guys that, one, don't care about the internet, two, are many times very shady characters, because who wants to have a funeral home in Poland? That really prepared me to deal with Nigerian businessmen sometimes. And so when I wanted to work for this big investment fund, because I fast forward, I was ready to finally open an international business, not to be stuck with Polish business all the time. And when they checked my history, they said, well, you never finished a university, you never worked for an investment bank or a big consulting company, which is usually our preferred profile, but you have this amazing background of first doing something in the finance sector, going bankrupt, getting your shit together, and opening a business, selling it. I'm talking about the first small one with the friend of mine. And then during this funeral business, that was my MBA, that was my CV, which allowed me to back then be hired by what was the most successful investment firm in Europe. And they gave me the opportunity to open this e-commerce business in Nigeria, and then in 17 more countries, and the rest is history.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great story, but it seems like you kind of took your experiences from your past, learned from them, and were able to apply them in a unique way as you gained experience, gained knowledge, grew as a person. And I feel like the book kind of helped us kind of see your growth pattern as well throughout starting out with investment, financial advisor and selling financial services, all the way to running a business, but then also, I guess at the very end, starting a nonprofit and trying to give back to the community and see what you can do to benefit the continent of Africa. But along the way, you got caught up in a little bit of corruption, where some people from your business partners turned on you a little bit. You want to tell a little bit about that story, because I think that's one of the most exciting parts of the book.
Yeah. So let me start with that angle of this book being also a story about the entrepreneur that is getting slowly and slowly more mature. Back in the day, after we built this successful business in Nigeria, and then we expanded to so many other countries, and it was about to go public, I already had the shares, and I'm going to make a lot of money. I was a cocky guy. I was very cocky. And I think that everything I'm going to touch now turns into gold. So I've opened another business. This time it was a software company. And I've invited some investors, business partners, local business partners to help me run this business, because there's this, again, not spoken rule that when you're a foreigner in a country, also because of those, racial tensions I told you about, you want to always have a local partner to help you when things go wrong in the region, in the country. Especially when, for example, some guys from the government, try to squeeze you out. I'm talking about getting some bribes.
Yeah.
You want to have someone to deal with this. Because as a foreigner, you're always way more vulnerable. Now, what no one tells you is that sometimes you can make a bad choice, and the guy that is supposed to help you with the business can be actually the bad guy. But I'm taking the blame for this, because I was this cocky guy, and what started as a normal conflict in the company between the CEO and the biggest investor and the founder, which is me, and one of the local guys, a conflict about where the company should go, whether we should merge with this other business, or we should buy them, we should go on our own, whether we should take more investors and go more aggressively, or whether we should spend less money and be profitable faster. What started as a normal conflict has become something about an ego issues, because I ended up telling him in the middle of a board meeting that he should shut up, that he's way older than me, and I know what I'm doing. This is a technology business, and I will do it my way. And then he decided to teach me a lesson, basically. First, he tried to take over the company. Basically, he went after behind my back and tried to convince every other shareholder to force me to step down and force me to sell my shares to them. I was able, after I found out, to convince everyone else to kick the other guy. So I did to him what he tried to do to me. And that's why I really crossed the line, because then he really wanted to teach me a lesson. And he didn't care about the company anymore. Basically, what happened is that he bribed the Nigerian police. They were supposed to come to my office and home, take me to jail, and they would keep me in jail for as long as it was needed for me to finally change my mind and sign the papers to give the company back for free, essentially. Mm-hmm. I was smart enough or lucky enough, depending how you look at it, to leave the country on time. And when this whole arrest warrant happened, I wasn't in the country anymore, so they couldn't really take me. They tried to extradite me to Nigeria, which wasn't possible. And then they've put the arrest warrant into Interpol, and they tried to bring me back to Nigeria with Interpol. And I'm going to put a stop here to explain everyone what is the issue with Interpol and why it happened. Because it's getting complicated, I know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to explain it in as simple terms as possible. Interpol right now is facing the same issues as Facebook and YouTube, because it's supposed to be a platform that connects all the police organizations around the world. It has a very noble goal. If someone is a criminal in one country, you don't want him just to move to another country and start from scratch without anyone else knowing what he did, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is, the Interpol members are countries like the United States, Switzerland, Germany, but also Iran, Afghanistan, Turkey, Nigeria, Russia. And you could probably have an opinion about, which country is more democratic, which country is less democratic. You know what I mean? I'm trying to keep a diplomatic language here. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, many times, if you have good relationship with local police, and any police person at the police station with an access to the internet can put a locally written arrest warrant, can put it into the system, and immediately it's around the world. Any airport in the world, if you show your passport, they will know about this. And in the best case scenario, they will keep you at the airport for a couple nights until they release you and they tell you, we don't want to have anything to do with it, but we're not going to let you in, go back to your country. In the worst case scenario, they will send you to this country where they're looking you from. And this is all designed to really take away your freedom of movement and blackmail you, because as long as the papers are in the system, you can't do anything. You're going to end up doing what they want you to do. And this mechanism is used by people with a lot of influence to fight business opponents or political opponents, because it's so easy to put you in the system. But just like with Facebook and YouTube, if someone puts a video, maybe with your image, and they don't have the right to, it puts, it's defaming you, and you want them to take it down, they don't want to, then you know how it works when you're trying to appeal to Facebook directly or to Google directly or to YouTube, right? It's going to take months, if not years. And that is the problem with Interpol. It takes even a couple years for them to have the time to analyze your appeal and take it down and realize that the arrest warrant shouldn't be there in the first place. And in the meantime, during those 2 years, your business has probably been damaged by then. You couldn't travel, you couldn't make any money. Your life has become a mess. Mm-hmm. And so that's the story.
Yeah, it was just so. I guess the way the story the book told it, it was so interesting how you were traveling, you were taken at the airport, arrested, and luckily enough, you weren't extradited. You were able to have an opportunity to meet with your lawyer, to figure this out, to clear your name. And then you have to go through this long process of court battles and suing the police and all these things that all ended up going in your favor, which is great. But, it did obviously take a lot out of you and take a lot of time to resolve. But after all this is done, what was the number one thing that you learned from this? And what did you get? What was the positive that you got out of this experience?
The most positive about this experience is that the experience itself made me write this book, because I would never write this book so soon about my life if it wasn't for this situation where I was spending a night in jail. I really thought I'm going to Nigeria and my life is over in one way or another. I knew they won't kill me, but I knew I'm going to have to give back my company, because I would sign any paper just to be released from a Nigerian jail, because you can imagine what is a Nigerian jail. And I remember saying to myself that, oh my God, if I get out of this alive, this business book that I always wanted to write, it now just got much more interesting because it has this criminal aspect. And if there's going to be a happy end, it will be just a cooler book. And that crazy thought really kept me motivated for the next 2 years to come, because that's how long it took me to fight all those legal things in Poland, in France, and in Nigeria. That I will be able to close this figuratively and literally in a form of a book and just move on with my life. And what really taught me is that once I wrote this book and I was able to, as I'm writing this book, I was able to look at everything that happened to my life, starting from being this bullied kid that wanted to prove something to someone else, to being this cocky guy that basically everything bad that happened to me, although there was this perpetrator that maybe broke the law to try to hurt me, I always took responsibility for forgiving my French, fucking up the communication or the relationship with that person in one way or another. Because, when you look at your life from the victim perspective, you kind of take away the power from yourself to be able to change your future. But when I was able to look at it from the perspective, if I didn't piss this guy off, if I was nicer to him, if I was better at communicating, if I was a better CEO or a co-founder or an entrepreneur, I wouldn't bring this guy to a level where he decided to teach me a lesson and he didn't care that he's going to break the law because that's what he does. Mm-hmm. So it kind of empowered me that maybe some bad stuff happens to me, but I will prefer to blame myself for it because it gives me power to react and then maybe not make this mistake again. And that's the biggest lesson from myself. I really took the moral responsibility for what happened to me. Not the legal one, because I never broke the law, but the moral one,
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
I think that's a great lesson to take away from it. And, I mean, going through this was, definitely difficult and a struggle for you, but, from reading the book, it seems like you really grew from this, and it also definitely made your entrepreneurship story of your time in Africa extremely more interesting. The book was really good along the way. Don't get me wrong, but then when you got to that point, I was like, oh, what? It was super good, and I really appreciate you writing it, and I can't wait for this to be turned into a movie because that's really what's got to happen next, right?
That would be nice.
Yeah. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about kind of the foundation that you guys have started and kind of what you're doing now when it comes to helping businesses in Africa?
Yeah. So how the foundation came along. Another thing that I wasn't really planning. I mean, I guess I thought that once I become rich and famous and old, I will put my part of my fortune into foundation to make it a noble gesture. That was always my plan. But then all this has happened to me, and I wanted to put this in the form of the book, but I didn't want to be accused of, publishing this book just for the money. I was publishing this book for many different reasons. So I decided that I will spend the money, whatever money I'm making from the book or from any speaking engagement around the book, because you know how it is, then the author is getting invited and so on and so on. I wanted to put this into a charity. Mm-hmm. And as an entrepreneur and investor in the online space as I am, I had the same approach to finding a charity, just like I do when I try to find a company to invest in. Show me what you're doing. Show me your, financial statements. Show me what you've done with the money you have raised so far. What are the long-term results? What are the short-term results, and so on. And because I didn't know much about how charity work worldwide, I was expecting something way more efficient to be, just to put it frankly. And when I noticed how those charities operate, how they really enforce the negative stereotypes about Africa, because that's how they're raising money, by scaring people away, but also scaring business away. It's like, sometimes those big corporations that produce drugs are accused that they're not really, helping people get healthy, because then no one will be buying their drugs. I don't know about this, but that I could see that vicious circle happening in the charity model. You really want to scare off the investors. You want to keep the status quo. You want to keep showing those kids with big bellies in TV, because that's what allows you to keep the machine going. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, that's not. I don't want to give money to this organization. So I want to open something on my own. It's going to be super small because I don't have much money. But if there's only a couple of people involved in running this organization, this charity event, then maybe it will be way more transparent, because the less people involved, the lower the potential of corruption or just, siphoning the money, you know what I mean? And so I was like, okay, we're doing this on my own. I did this with my girlfriend, the love of my life, and she told me, you want to help? Let's do this. And she told me that we want to focus on women, on empowering women in poor areas. Because if you empower women, then three things happens at once. First of all, women get better education, so they can be more involved in business. And it's already been proven that more women in business makes better business. the more women in management, the companies somehow perform better. Then educated women and empowered women have less babies, which means you have less poor babies. And in those, especially in those poor areas, there's overpopulation. Parents want to have 20 kids because they have to assume, as crazy as it sounds, that half of the kids will die because they have no medical help. So they just want to make more babies and assume some of them will die. So you solve the problem by educating the woman better. And then an educated woman will also make sure that her baby is educated. So it's like the best, you get the biggest bang for the buck if you help women in those, how do I call this, not the luckiest regions of the world. Right. Let me just put it this way. And there's way more to it, but I don't want to like bore you with this. But it also became a crazy adventure with this Maya Foundation. Something that I was never expecting that's gonna happen. Essentially, we decided that instead of just buying 100 meals per day and helping a lot of people here and there from time to time, we prefer to choose a smaller group of kids, but help them for as long as it's needed until they become financially independent. So we actually see that you gave them a tool to hunt fish, not the fish itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then hopefully once they become financially independent, they will be very thankful to what you did to them. And then maybe they will want to now help the foundation to help, the next generation. So we're hoping for this ripple effect to happen as well. So that's another cool thing. And another, really long-term project, because we started very, very small from, just a couple of thousands of dollars. That was our first donation. And then hopefully it will go bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, that's like, it goes back to that old saying, instead of giving a man a fish, teach the man to fish. And that's
exactly what I was referring to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of doing it, because then hopefully, once they become financially independent on their own, they will want to give back and they want to do the same. So you'll have like this continued effect of not just reaching, one generation, but many generations.
Correct.
Well, Marek, this has been a fantastic conversation. How can people find out more about you and buy the book? I'm going to link it up on a Geek Leader website. We're going to have it on our books from our guest page. I highly recommend everyone to check out the audiobook as well, because that was just, it was really well read. It was very well written as well, and just super entertaining story. And I can't wait for the movie to come out. You got to get that working.
Thank you so much. So you already know how hard it is to pronounce my name. So my personal website, let's not do this. Let's not pronounce it here. Maybe you could put it in the notes.
Yes, definitely.
However, you can just go to chasingblackunicorns.com, which is just the title of the book, and you will land at the same website. It just has a different alternative domain. And on this website, you'll find all my social media handles. You will find information about the book, about the foundation, and all the stuff that we're doing with it. All my background, my TED Talks. It's like a one-stop shop about myself. So thanks for allowing me to share that. And it's chasingblackunicorns.com.
All right, so head on over to chasingblackunicorns.com to find out more about this incredible entrepreneurship journey in Africa. And Marek, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Hey, it was such a pleasure. It's always a good sign when you don't even know when the hour has passed. That means it's a good call. Thanks so much.
Hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. And don't forget that you can sign up for private internet access for only $3.33 a month. Check it out at geekleader.com/VPN.